The standard single-emitter lightsaber is the most iconic weapon in the Star Wars galaxy, wielded by both Jedi and Sith for millennia. The lightsaber is a weapon consisting of a plasma blade powered by a kyber crystal which is emitted from a hilt that is typically constructed from metal alloys. A standard lightsaber hilt was cylindrical in shape, typically measuring between 24 and 30 centimeters in length. However, hilts varied significantly in design, as each was custom-built to suit the specific needs and fighting style of its creator. Count Dooku, for example, had a curved hilt to favor his Form 2 fighting style in Makashi better. Darth Malgus had 2 additional blades on top of his hilt which he could use to stab enemies without activating his lightsaber. Inside the hilt, a high-output diatium power cell generated energy, which was channeled through a complex system of focusing lenses and energizers into the kyber crystal, which then enhanced the energy significantly. From the kyber crystal, it passed to the emitter matrix, where field energizers and modulation circuitry shaped it into a coherent blade. This energy beam was projected from the blade emitter, extending more than 1 meter before being curved back by the blade containment field into a negatively charged fissure encircling the emitter. A superconducting loop then redirected the energy back to the power cell, forming a continuous circuit. That was very complex, but basically this containment field made the lightsaber what it is, preventing it from behaving like a typical energy stream. Instead of passing through other lightsaber blades or solid objects, the energy field generated by a lightsaber allowed for blocking, deflecting, and parrying attacks, as well as other energy weapons like blaster bolts. The activation mechanism varied, but usually involved a button or a switch. Some lightsabers included a power adjustment knob, allowing the user to modify the blade's energy output. Certain hits also contained a discharge energy cell to increase the power output of the lightsaber. A lightsaber blade emitted no heat under normal conditions and did not expend energy unless it made contact with a solid object. When cutting through material, the blade's intense power could slice through almost any substance, though the denser the materials, the longer it took to sever. The electromagnetic field surrounding the plasma arc created resistance, making the blade feel solid when pressed against an object. Also, unlike when hit with a regular bladed weapon, lightsaber wounds were cauterized immediately upon impact due to the immense heat of the lightsaber, which minimized blood loss even when users had an entire limb chopped off. There were also rare materials in the Star Wars galaxy that could resist or even short out a lightsaber's energy field. Some notable ones a lightsaber couldn't cut through were Beskar, Frick, and Cortosis, with the latter even being able to short out a lightsaber temporarily. Additionally, strong electromagnetic forces and energy shields couldn't be cut through either. So, as Obi-Wan said, it's an elegant weapon for a more civilized time, but there are a lot more variants than just the standard one to get into. Training lightsabers are specialized, non-lethal versions of standard lightsabers, designed for younglings and apprentices learning the way of the Jedi. These weapons produce a low-powered blade that stings or bruises on contact rather than causing lethal injuries, making them perfect for safe sparring sessions. Training lightsabers were often used in the early education of Jedi initiates when the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, where they learned basic combat techniques before constructing their own weapons during the Gathering. While most training lightsabers were constructed specifically for younglings, standard lightsabers could also be modified to function in a training mode by adjusting their power output. This allowed Jedi Masters to safely duel their students without risking serious harm. Jedi such as Yoda and Jedi Temple instructors often oversaw these training sessions themselves and engaged with them as well. The Force Saber was an ancient weapon developed by the Rakata, using dark side energy channeled through synthetic ebon crystals. The Rakata were an ancient species that developed a lot of different advanced weapons with the help of the dark side. They laid the foundation for several advancements and innovations, one such being the lightsaber. The crystals from the Force Saber produced glowing energy blades that could be ignited similarly to the lightsabers that come much later. Their looks resembled standard lightsabers as well as lightsaber pikes and came in various colors. The core technology behind Force Sabers eventually laid the foundation for the prototype lightsabers developed by the early Jedi. The Proto-Saber was an early precursor to the modern lightsaber. Developed by the Jedi Order during the ancient days of the galaxy, unlike its more advanced successor, the Proto-Saber featured an external power pack connected to the hilt via a conductive cable. This design was necessary due to the technological limitations of the time, as internal power cells were not yet capable of sustaining a stable plasma blade without quickly depleting their energy reserves. This made it rather inconvenient, as it limited the user's mobility, and Jedi wielding proto-sabers also had to be mindful of the power cord, as an opponent could sever it, rendering the weapon useless. Despite these drawbacks, the proto-saber was a significant step forward in the evolution of energy-based melee weapons, allowing Jedi to harness the Kyber crystal's power. As energy storage technology advanced, the bulky external power packs were eventually phased out, leading to the self-contained lightsabers that became the standard for Force users. The proto-saber, though obsolete at this point, remained an important historical artifact showing the progression of the Jedi. The Shoto lightsaber, also known as a light dagger, was a smaller version of a standard lightsaber. It was designed primarily as an offhand weapon for Jarkai dual-wield practitioners to use as a second blade. It was, however, also favored by Jedi and Sith of smaller stature who found full-size lightsabers impractical. Shotos, due to their short blade, were mainly used for parrying, allowing the wielder's primary lightsaber to remain free for counterattacks. Mastery of this weapon required to be rather skilled in Jarkai to avoid injury oneself while coordinating both blades at the same time. Another advantage was that due to its small size, wielders could be faster and more reactive, which had some duelists even wielding two Shotos instead of a standard lightsaber, sacrificing reach for a faster reaction time. That's why practitioners of Ataru, which incorporates a lot of acrobatics and kicks into the fight, often use Shoto as well. Notable Jedi using a Shoto were Grandmaster Yoda as well as Master Yaddle. This was mainly due to their short height, however. Sora Bulk and Ahsoka Tano both wielded a Shoto alongside their standard lightsaber as well. A dual-phase lightsaber was a specialized variant that contained 2 or more lightsaber crystals that allowed its blade to adjust its original length with a single activation. Unlike standard lightsabers, which had manual blade length adjusters, dual-phase lightsabers could change length instantly, catching opponents off guard. Some also featured an adjustable blade width and the ability to switch between the different crystals. Some Jedi were said to have even built a version that extended from 1.3 meters to 3 meters with the flick of a switch. These lightsaber variants were most common during the Jedi Civil War, an era when lightsaber duels were frequent and the Sith were at their peak. As Jedi sought to resolve conflicts without drawing their weapons, duels became rarer, and dual-phase lightsabers fell out of favor. Darth Vader most notably also had a dual-phase lightsaber that was able to adjust its length on command. The double-bladed lightsaber, also called a saber staff, was the next step of development in lightsaber design. Instead of a single plasma blade, this lightsaber featured 2 blades extending from either end of a single hilt, allowing its user to strike from multiple angles simultaneously. The original double-bladed lightsabers was first developed by the Dark Lords of the Sith Empire and featured a single lightsaber mechanism with 2 emitters, one on each end of the hilt. Among the most renowned examples was Exar Kun's saber, which he modified from a standard lightsaber after studying schematics from a Sith holocron. Over time, the design evolved, with later versions featuring a larger hilt, possibly due to changes in manufacturing techniques or a lack of ability to replicate the original mechanism. However, most double-bladed lightsabers eventually became simpler in design, consisting of 2 separate lightsabers connected at the pommel rather than a single mechanism. This adjustment made them easier to construct but resulted in a longer handle. The primary advantage of a double-bladed lightsaber was its ability to quick consecutive attacks with minimal movement, thus making an aggressive fighting style more effective. The weapon's visual impact also played a psychological role, as opponents instinctively attempted to track both blades separately rather than treating it as a single weapon, which often led to them feeling overwhelmed. Despite its advantage, the double-bladed lightsaber had some drawbacks. Mastery of the weapon required specialized training, as improper use could easily lead to self-inflicted injuries. The weapon's unique structure also limited flexibility in combat. Unlike a standard lightsaber, the wielder couldn't freely adjust their stance, as they had to maintain either a horizontal or diagonal grip. One of the greatest weaknesses of the later double-bladed lightsaber was its enlarged hilt, which presented a larger target for opponents. Many duelists would attempt to strike at the hilt to disable the weapon. While traditional double-bladed lightsabers with a single mechanism were highly susceptible to this tactic, later designs mitigated this weakness by using two independent lightsabers that could function separately if one side was disabled. Darth Maul's lightsaber, for example, kept working despite being cut in half in his duel on Naboo. Because of its limitations and the rather specialized combat techniques necessary to master this weapon, most Force users preferred the traditional single-bladed lightsaber over the double-bladed variant. However, due to its lack of popularity, it also gave double-bladed lightsaber wielders the advantage that their opponents were often unfamiliar with how to counter their techniques. The hinged double-bladed lightsaber was a specialized variant of the traditional double-bladed design, featuring a central hinge that allowed the hilt to fold together for easier storage. This unique mechanism provided added versatility as the weapon could be used in both its extended and collapsed forms. While folded, one or both blades could still be activated, allowing the wielder to use the parallel blades to sometimes trap an opponent's lightsaber. Some Jedi Temple guards carried this style of lightsaber. Jedi General Pong Krell was also known for wielding two hinged double-bladed lightsabers simultaneously, and was the first Jedi to use them on screen. Cal Kestis can also be seen using one of them in the Jedi Fallen Order games. The double-bladed spinning lightsaber, also known as the Inquisitor lightsaber, was used by the Inquisitorius, a group of dark side enforcers serving the Galactic Empire. Unlike traditional dual-bladed lightsabers, it was rather compact and roughly the size of a standard single-bladed saber. Its most defining feature was a circular emitter ring that allowed the blades to spin independently along a track while the hilt remained stationary. It could be used as a single blade as well as a double-bladed weapon, where the emitter ring could fold in to make it easier to hold when fighting with one blade. Several Inquisitors had modified versions of the weapon. The third sister and sixth brother wielded split sabers that could separate into two independent lightsabers. The eighth brother's lightsaber hilt incorporated a rotating buzzsaw-like blade. One of the most unusual capabilities of the spinning lightsaber was its ability to function as a personal flight device for Force-sensitive wielders. By combining micro-repulsor lifts with the rapid spinning of the blades, an Inquisitor could achieve short bursts of flight, often using this ability to escape combat. Although we won't go into more detail as to how dumb that actually is and doesn't really make sense. Despite these advantages, the weapon had some flaws. The emitter ring created a large target, making it vulnerable to someone striking at it. If an opponent severed the ring, the spinning function would fail, potentially causing the weapon to break apart. A split saber was any lightsaber that could separate into two individual weapons. Most commonly, this design was seen in double-bladed lightsabers that could detach into a pair of single sabers. In the Clone Wars, Asajj Ventress carried a pair of curved hilt lightsabers that could connect at the hilt, though she rarely used them this way. In the 2005 Battlefront, Ventress can be seen wielding this pair of saber nunchucks that can also be considered as split sabers, where her two lightsabers were connected with a chain, though this configuration looks rather unique and hasn't been seen ever since. Several Imperial Inquisitors, including the third sister, fifth brother, and sixth brother, used double-bladed spinning lightsabers that could split into two separate blades as well, so they can also be considered as split sabers, although they're also their own category. Cal Kestis as well as Dagan Gera both can be seen using split sabers quite often. The lightsaber pike, or lightsaber lance, was a lightsaber that best resembled a halberd or spear. It was primarily wielded by Jedi Temple guards during the Clone Wars and was considered a rather exotic choice among Jedi warriors. Members of the Knights of Zakul from the Eternal Empire, as well as the Imperial Shadow Guards, were known to use lightsaber pikes. There were two primary variations of the lightsaber pike. The first resembled something like a traditional spear. It featured a long handle, which was often crafted from a lightsaber-resistant material like frick alloy, and a short lightsaber blade at one end. The activation switch was positioned along the shaft, and the weapon's length allowed the wielder to maintain distance from opponents. A second variation had a blade at both ends, making it visually and functionally similar to a double-bladed lightsaber. Jedi Temple guards primarily used this model, which featured shorter than average yellow blades. The broadsaber was a specialized lightsaber variant featuring unique focusing lenses and emitters that produced a broader, flatter blade compared to the standard cylindrical lightsaber. This design gave it a profile similar to a traditional metal sword, offering a larger striking surface but sacrificing the omnidirectional cutting edge of a typical lightsaber. Due to these differences, broadsabers were not widely favored among Jedi, with many masters considering them less elegant than standard lightsabers. However, they were well suited for Form 1 lightsaber combat, leading some practitioners of the form to favor them. The Light Club or Greater Lightsaber was an oversized variant designed for large individuals. These weapons were heavy, often unwieldy, and featured reinforced hilts that generated blades over 2 meters long. These rare weapons were typically used by exceptionally large beings, one such being Gork, a mutated Gamorrean Dark Jedi. The Crossguard lightsaber was an ancient variant featuring 3 blades, a primary blade and 2 smaller side vents known as quillins positioned just below it. These quillins served as energy vents, stabilizing the blade, but could also be used to cut things if necessary. These vents, known as quillins, emitted 2 smaller blades that helped release excess energy from the main blade. These side blades were extensions of the primary blade, created by directing energy through a series of focusing crystal activators. To protect the wielder's hands during combat, emitter shrouds were built around the quillins, but at the same time, the crossguard form protected the wielder's hand during a duel. The weapon was especially favored by practitioners of Makashi or Form 2 lightsaber combat, and was commonly seen during the Great Scourge of Malachor. Its design was popularized in The Force Awakens. Kylo Ren modified his Jedi lightsaber into a crossguard design after bleeding his kyber crystal, which cracked in the process. The quillins on his weapons acted as vents, preventing the unstable blade from overloading. In the EU, a lightsaber with a physical crossguard can be seen in the vault of Count Dooku, which he had taken from a Jedi after the Battle of Galadron. Light foils were small, refined energy swords inspired by lightsaber technology. Originally developed in secret by the Sith of the Macrossa Order, they matched Jedi lightsabers in quality. Following the eradication of the Sith, a new generation of light foils emerged. These so-called modern light foils were produced by non-force sensitives and gained popularity among the nobles of the Tapani sector. However, these replicas were inferior to the original Sith designs as they lacked high-quality focusing crystals and the craftsmanship of a force user, which made their power significantly weaker than regular lightsabers. A light whip, also known as an energy whip or laser whip, was a rare and exotic variation of the lightsaber. Functioning on the same basic principles, it emitted a coherent energy blade, but unlike the rigid blade of a standard lightsaber, a light whip produced a long, flexible plasma strand that could extend several meters. Instead of a single large kyber crystal, light whips relied on multiple smaller crystals, and their plasma lacked containment fields to maintain a straight form. These weapons came in various colors, including red, orange, pink, yellow, and green. It was used like a conventional whip, and they were very rare, which gave users an advantage as most opponents were unfamiliar facing off against this type of weapon. It had a bigger reach than a lightsaber, but were also kinda hard to control. They were also less powerful than standard lightsabers, struggling to cut through durasteel armor and certain resistant materials. Defensively, they were ineffective at blocking fast or heavy strikes, and the energy strands could short out when hit with enough force. Some wielders attempted to mitigate these flaws by incorporating solid material into the whip's tassels. Lumia's light whip, for example, included Mandalorian iron and gem-studded metal strands. However, this design was also far from perfect, as opponents skilled in Jarkai dual-blade combat could ensnare the energy strand with one weapon while slicing through the solid tassels with the other. Saber canes were a discrete variation of the traditional lightsaber, with the hilt disguised as the handle of a cane. Jedi Master Tara Sinub carried one during the Clone Wars, using it as both a walking aid and a concealed weapon. Years later, Maul also wielded a saber cane in Star Wars Rebels during the Malastare arc. The sickle-bladed lightsaber was a unique lightsaber variant used by the Sith Lord Darth Noctis. Unlike standard designs, this weapon had a curved blade, giving it the appearance of a scimitar forged from energy rather than metal. A lightsaber gauntlet was an arm-mounted weapon used by some Force sensitives, possibly including members of the Jedi Order. When activated, it projected one or more lightsaber-like blades directly from the gauntlet. It resembled the wrist gear worn by bounty hunters like Cad Bane or Boba Fett, but instead of blaster weapons or rockets, it housed energy emitters capable of producing glowing blades similar to lightsabers. Plo Koon was rumored to have used such a lightsaber gauntlet at some point. A lightsaber blaster hybrid was a modified lightsaber that included a built-in blaster. Ezra Bridger created one of these lightsabers. While the Jedi traditionally rejected blasters, Ezra was more unconventional, as he was trained without a reigning Jedi Order during the Imperial era. Its form also disguised the lightsaber a bit, as it looked more like a fancy gadget rather than a lightsaber, which would help him keep it hidden. The modified hilts included a secondary emitter that could fire energy blasts similar to blaster bolts from the same energy source as the lightsaber blades. However, since these bolts weren't stabilized by the same focusing field used for the lightsaber blades, they lost coherence quickly, which limited their range and their impact, making them more like stun bolts rather than actual blaster shots. The Grand Inquisitor even was directly hit by them and just laughed it off. The lightsaber rifle combined a traditional rifle with a lightsaber. It functioned by loading a lightsaber into the top of the weapon and channeling the lightsaber's energy through the rifle, thus generating an incredibly powerful blaster shot. It was limited to 5 shots though before it ran out of power. Once it ran out of power, there was a self-destruct function that could act as a bomb as well. During the first year of the Galactic Empire, Jocasta Nu used a lightsaber rifle known as the Archives Rifle during her confrontation with Darth Vader. The lightsaber parasol was a custom weapon built by Kauru, a Sith warrior and leader of a bandit gang. On its own, the hilt functioned as a standard single-bladed lightsaber. It could be paired with its parasol-style auxiliary, which, when connected to the hilt, redirected the Kyber's crystal's energy upward and outward. This combined construction emitted multiple red plasma blades radiating outward, forming a circular shield-like pattern, which could then spin just like the Inquisitors' lightsabers. It is based on ancient Sith designs and looks rather difficult to wield. Kauru was eventually killed in a duel, and the lightsaber parasol was gifted to a local shopkeeper, although it wasn't functional anymore. The Darksaber was an ancient and distinctive version of the lightsaber, unlike any other weapon of its kind. It emitted a flat, black plasma blade shaped more like a traditional sword, with a thin, curved point. It was roughly a meter long, and the blade absorbed light around it, giving off a faint white glow at the edges and creating a visual effect similar to a black hole. Its hilt was long, narrow, and rectangular, designed for a two-headed grip, with a jagged emitter and an angled crossguard. It was also made out of the Mandalorian's rare Beskar material, which made its hilt lightsaber resistant. When activated, the blade gave off a more high-pitched hum than traditional lightsabers and whistled when swung. Upon striking another object, it produced a harsh screech, and its white-edged blade crackled with energy. The Darksaber had a very unique crystal that acted as a conduit for Force energy, linking the weapon directly to its wielder's state of mind. The blade's power flowed in response to the user's thoughts and emotions, sometimes sparking with visible energy when those emotions intensified. The connection was mostly subconscious, and if the wielder resisted it, the blade felt heavier and harder to control. If they embraced the bond, it became lighter and more responsive in combat. So yeah, that's the reason why the Mandalorian, it seems like Mando can't really wield it. The Darksaber has a long history and was said to have been created by the first Mandalorian Jedi. After his passing, it was kept in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. At some point, it was stolen from the temple by members of Clan Vizsla and passed down through generations. The Darksaber became a symbol of leadership among the Mandalorians, and was often used in combat against the Jedi, being responsible for many of their deaths. It was eventually destroyed in The Mandalorian Season 3 at the hands of Moff Gideon when he crushed it with his Beskar suit. The Tag Protoblade was a plasma-based weapon developed by the Tag Corporation as a lightsaber imitation. It's unknown how exactly it was constructed, but it was able to clash blades with a real lightsaber. In the EU, Baron Tag had it created as he wanted a weapon capable of killing Darth Vader. In the Disney canon, it appears in the Dr. Aphra comics, and is used by a character named Domina. The Octo-bladed lightsaber is a very rare lightsaber where it could produce up to 8 blades from a single lightsaber emitter seemingly out of nowhere. It was used by Lego Maul whenever he gets into a narcissistic state and sings about how awesome and handsome he is. He doesn't really use it to fight though, and rather just to intimidate his rivals and opponents. Phineas and Ferb came up with a lightsaber gauntlet that resembles the parasol quite a lot, but also had the Inquisitor's spinning function. It's said to be the most fancy lightsaber ever created, and Emperor Palpatine is said to have asked the creation of several of these for his own army. Also, unlike Lego Maul, Phineas and Ferb used their sabers with several blades in combat as well. The lightsaber used by Herb in Family Guy is very unique as well, as it was able to emit a robust blade at first, but then crooked into something like a light whip. This phenomenon is said to only have ever been recreated by Herb, though. And yeah, that's it. Every lightsaber type there is. Also, for anyone unaware, there's a character in Star Wars who actually went through the galaxy to collect each and every one of them to add to his collection.